All right, we'll get started. We've got Ben and Karen here from Friends of Family.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your day to come down and listen to us babble a little bit about active bystander training and a little bit about our organization. Is everyone here familiar with Friends of the Family, or kind of
A little.
what we do? What do we do?
Really?
Yes, you better know.
We'll pick on Melinda.
So you have many different programs that you run through Friends of the Family. You have a domestic violence shelter. You have transitional housing. No more transitional
No
housing?
transitional. Look at that.
Oh my gosh.
It's been years.
Human trafficking.
Yes.
And
So transitional housing is turned into rapid rehousing for homeless families and individuals. It's a different intervention that really helps us move through the system, work towards ending homelessness quicker. Permanent supportive housing for individuals and families with disabilities would be another program that we offer within the 9 county areas. And then we do prevention education in the schools. We have one full-time prevention educator. His name is Anthony James, better known as AJ. If you were a UNI basketball fan 7 years ago, you would have seen AJ
I knew he would
hitting the game-winning shot against Creighton when Creighton was ranked in the top 15. So AJ is out there pushing and doing our prevention ed. So unfortunately for you guys, he is actually traveling for work today. So you got Karen and I. Karen is very good at this. You're stuck with me. But we're going to talk about active bystander training. We are going to make this a little interactive, so hopefully you can kind of eat food and be a little bit interactive at the same time.
I was unaware.
Oh,
you always wait to see who gets up and leaves.
right. You have 5 seconds. So one of the things that we do and we get trained on at Friends of the Family is something called MVP. That stands for Mentors in Violence Prevention. And it's a curriculum that's used to prompt people to become better at being bystanders when they see something happening in front of them. How do I become that person that's willing to intervene, that's willing to help somebody through a tough situation and be successful there? And so what it defines a bystander as is a friend, a colleague, a coworker, a family member, a neighbor, a partner, or a team member. Anybody, right? Pretty much anybody could be a bystander.
Okay, so talking about bystander intervention, seeing something, saying something, that's the one that's become most popular. But why don't bystanders intervene? A lot of times, and mostly, is because they lack the skill and confidence. It does take a little bit of confidence and does take the right words and the right way to do something to intervene into a situation. It can be uncomfortable because it is saying, hey, I see you're doing something wrong, or something here is making me uncomfortable, and having that confidence to say that, but also the way to do it. Fear, safety, career, etc. Again, that confidence, but also how's that other person going to react? I am actually the human trafficking program manager, and so when we're doing a lot of talks about what people can do, we also talk to them about do not personally intervene, like do not go in and rescue someone, whatever, because of safety concerns. And that's true of many things. Assess the situation, but is your intervention direct with that person, or is your intervention, I'm calling the police, or I'm calling someone else, or I'm going to get loud and draw attention to what's going on. So fear isn't always a bad thing. Fear can also add to our safety. Lack of social peer reward or approval, peer pressure, being made fun of because we're standing up because there's some language and there's some sexist, homophobic, racist language going on, and we're saying that's not okay, and all our peers are saying, man, just settle down, you're being ridiculous, or making fun of someone who's standing up to others. Culture, environment, lack of support. Again, speaking up within our cultural groups. within different systems that may not support these ideas. Again, bystanders don't, because we don't see it as a problem. Your language isn't offensive to me. I don't know what, or it's none of my business, things like that, but don't see it as something that I need to address or that there's a problem. And then lack of status, and of the chain of command, but I don't have the right to stand up, or I don't feel safe with my place in the situation, in the organization, in the social situation, whatever, to be able to speak to that person, you know, talking about speaking truth to power, things like that, and how difficult that is, or feeling that I have a right to intervene or stand up in certain situations.
So one of the things we identify is the stages of bystander behavior. What do you experience as a bystander? It all starts with noticing the event. What's happening around you? Do you see a man grab a woman in the parking lot at Walmart? Do you notice the event that's occurring? Then how do you interpret it? Do you interpret it as a problem? Are they having a fight? Are they playing around? Many of us might be walking through the mall and we might see a mother yelling at a child and feel like that doesn't feel right to us, right? But we've got to interpret, where does that problem fall on the spectrum? Then we have to decide whether we feel responsible for dealing with it, which is really difficult at times. Am I going to be the person that's going to say something? Is that my responsibility? Or do I kind of just let it go? And then you've got to possess the necessary skills to act, which I think is tough, because I think you can have that freeze mentality sometimes where you know it's not right, and you just kind of stop for 1 second and, oh, it's not my problem, and then it's gone. And, you know, we don't know what happens after there. So we go through those different stages that we see in front of us, and what we want to do is talk about how we can give people the necessary skills to act when there's the opportunity to be a bystander.
So this is the pyramid of abuse. And so talking about how things can start down here with statements, we often refer to them as beliefs. Beliefs that we've held, beliefs that have been taught to us, and looking at those and hearing those. And, you know, going on up, it's kind of a continuum that it turns into put downs, intimidating. Look, verbal assault, threats, pushing, slapping, sexual or physical assault, rape, murder. Okay? You could also look at this as I looked into the light, a line. If you know, so the pyramid works for me, but if you want to think of it in a line, we're over here with sexist and racist jokes, beliefs, everything else that leads to a continuum of extreme violence and murder. What the philosophy is and belief is with bystander intervention is if we're noticing things here, and with an effective bystander intervention, saying to someone, when I hear you say that, this is what I hear, is that what you mean? And that concerns me, and that's not okay. The person may blow you off, they may say, yeah, whatever, but you planted something, right? And if we can stop things here, it's not going to continue to go up. But if we're not, as bystanders, when we hear things or something makes us uncomfortable doing this, then we go on this continuum. And so that's why bystander intervention is so important to other people's safety, to our society's safety, and the safety of people that we love and care about. And not just physical safety, but emotional safety. Because, you know, all these things, of course, have an emotional impact on every step of the way. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's important you think about creating a community that feels safe for everyone. No matter who you are, definitely starts here. And as we continue to challenge behaviors that are occurring at this level, that people do feel safe, this occurrence is gonna start to come down over time, right? We start to challenge here, we're going to have less of this as we challenge people more. Questions so far? So, we talked about interaction. Everybody's favorite, right? Maybe that's why I haven't been invited back for a couple of years. Interaction. It doesn't take long. So, we're going to talk about a scenario, because really to be effective in bystander training, you have to work through a scenario for this to be effective. And so here's what we've got. You're concerned about behavior you've recently seen from a colleague during work. More than once, you've observed the colleague in tense phone conversations, then hanging the phone up, cursing his partner's name in a highly agitated manner. No one is saying anything. So that's the scenario. Could this be a real scenario? Absolutely, absolutely. So our train of thought as we go into this is he really upset or just having a bad day? Is this argument just between the two of them? Does that matter? If I remain silent, am I endorsing my colleague's behavior? Should I report the incident? Is it any of my business? What should I do? These all seem like questions we would probably be asking ourselves in those scenarios, right? So we go through these trains of thought and we start to think about what's happening through this situation. So the interactive part is, first, as we said, is this situation realistic? And I think everyone was nodding their head yes. Could that happen within our workspace and or surrounding community? Does that seem like the values that many of you hold, or the organization, Waverly Health Center, would hold, is to have that conversation occur with somebody at work? Is a question that you would want to ask, where are our values within this? So, would somebody be willing to talk about what's problematic about that situation?
Could make for a pretty uncomfortable workspace. I mean, I could, like where I sit, I mean, it's different from where other people live. I mean, like mine, we've got kind of a few cubes and everything, and everyone can hear what everyone says. And, if you heard someone, and slamming the phone down, I mean, you're not going to want to just walk over to that person necessarily, depending on how well you know them, and just be like, hey, I need you to work on this for me.
Yep. I'll jump back here to the scenario. And so, what concerns or red flags do you guys see in this scenario?
If he's not worried about what he says in front of other people at work, I worry about what he says when he gets home.
That's an excellent point right there. Any other red flags? Okay.
It appears that it's been ongoing. It's not just the first time it's happened.
Yep. So what responsibility might the bystander in this situation have to the person being targeted? To the person on the other end of the phone? Is there any responsibility that the person that heard this conversation has to the person on the other side of the phone? Or what about the responsibility to the person causing the potential harm?
That's where I'd ask, hey, I couldn't help but hear your conversation, your end of the conversation, what's going on? Do you need to talk about it? And then maybe some of that back and forth talking, you can maybe calm them down a little bit and give your perspective on whatever caused that conversation.
How many people feel like they would have responsibility towards the person that was committing the harm in this scenario? Excellent. What responsibility might you have towards the health center in that scenario? Is there a responsibility towards that?
So, yeah,
Yeah.
to protect the work environment.
So we can see how this escalates very quickly, or even to yourself. What responsibility do you have yourself with that? Because you've just heard this uncomfortable conversation, right? Do I want to continue to work with this person? Is their spouse safe? Is this, blah, blah, blah happening. There's so many different factors that are going in here, right? That's creating this value system for us as human beings to how am I going to intervene within the situation.
Well, and I think the thought too is coworker, which you kind of alluded to as well, is like, okay, if he would treat his partner this way, how's he gonna treat me?
Yeah.
Am I safe with this person if I anger them or which then takes away my ability to effectively do my job if I need to raise a concern or so then I've been taken away from my ability to be effective as well, to some extent.
Has anyone ever witnessed or observed a similar situation to this? Yeah? We've got
Actually,
one.
last weekend, I was in the same scenario. Actually, it was not myself, but
Uh-huh.
I work at another place and with another coworker. And of course, I'm not a very quiet person, so I did ask what was happening and,
Good.
you know, because it was coming, you could tell that it was coming from the other end and she was upset and she was yelling on the phone and he must have been hanging up on her and then she would call him back and then they go at it again and so finally, you know, we were the only two working and I said, you know, we need to stop first off because we need to work together. And then as we were working, I was just kind of talking to her about it, you know, just seeing how escalated things are typically, or, you know, I think things are fine, it was just one of those one-time things, but I took it on myself to make sure things are okay.
See, I knew we should have brought prizes. Jeez. You think about it after the fact,
It
right?
came up, I was like, oh my gosh.
I've got used pens and cough drops in my purse.
Right. We call them game used pens in our office, right? I try to sign with the pen every time so someone can have a game used pen from me. I'm humoring myself in some ways. Has anybody ever observed others intervene into a situation, either similar to this, or you've seen something happen at a mall, at a retail store, the fair? I mean, and do you kind of watch them and kind of wait to see what is the outcome? And does it turn into kind of a camera lens for you? Or, man, that guy's pretty cool, or she's pretty cool because she was actually willing to intervene? I mean, how do you feel when you see someone else intervene in that? Thank God it wasn't me. That's...
I think it always depends how it plays out. When you said that, the first thing I just thought of was like right before, I think it was the weekend before Christmas. I was running out to get like one other gift at the mall, and so shopping was obviously insane. And I don't remember what store it was, but I was coming right out of it, and right out there was a lady just like yelling at her I'm presuming husband and child, and like she was just like freaking out. And this other woman just walks up behind her and whaps her upside the head. Like,
Oh my goodness.
and I just like, I didn't think that I froze like I did, but I was just standing there gawking
Who would you
basically.
intervene on? The woman that's.
Yeah.
So I was just here watching this, so as you said camera lens, I'm kind of like watching this play out. And I'm assuming like they kind of knew each other because she kind of calmed down, but she's like, why did you blah blah blah? She's like, because you're freaking out. And she's like, and your kid's starting to cry. And I kind of trailed off at that point. But
We should probably work on solutions that don't involve whacking people upside the back of the head, right? That would be good. One of the other questions, to think about is, why might people choose to be silent in this situation? Because we always talk about why you would intervene, but why would people be silent?
Think it's not their business.
Yep.
Retaliation.
yeah.
It's huge.
Do you guys ever watch that show, What Would You Do?
Yes. That's just-
I'm always afraid that something's gonna happen and I'm gonna get caught not doing the right thing. So I wanna always do the right thing.
The camera's on right now.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think the silent too that sometimes is, I don't know what to say, or that, we also have those instincts about safety, but like, I don't know what to say, and is this as bad as I think it is, like putting my values on somebody else, and,
Or is this my place?
Exactly,
Probably
exactly.
Or am I making the situation worse?
Oh yeah, am I gonna make it worse?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about that, like, I always think of scenarios like this, it's like, okay, so is that person then go home and say, you got me in trouble at work, or you caused a scene for me at work and everything else, and does that make that, you know, if this person is an abusive person, you know, it is fraught with, like, what is the right thing to do? I mean, the research and everything else tells us intervening is, appropriate intervening is the best thing, you know, but it's like, having that language, having that ability to say, wow, it seems like, you know, and even if you, like in this scenario, keep it on, focus on them, seems like you're really agitated, sounds like, you know, there's some stuff going on, what do you need, what, you know, so.
Yeah. The other question I would ask is, if you didn't intervene or respond immediately, would you feel more comfortable saying something later to that person, maybe after you felt like it's kind of cooled down? Or would you be more willing to address it then and there? Then and there.
Yeah.
Depends on how
Depends on
tense
the
the
scenario
phone
and
conversation was and what they're brewing about.
And everyone understands who they might go to for help in this situation, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can't address my ex-husband, I can't address him right then and there, because things will hit the fan. But if I wait a week, he's got the ability to rationally talk about it. But if I don't, if I do it then, it's not a good situation for anybody. So, you know, but you don't always have the luxury of knowing,
Right, who
of
you're,
knowing who you're dealing with, right, or the individual. Yeah,
Right.
it's complicated.
See, that was really good interaction. You guys were really good at that. So yeah, that was the scenario that we brought, and just kind of the train of thought. It gives us an opportunity to kind of work through some of this, and we want people to feel empowered. And when you walk through these situations and you think about how would I respond, it really gives you the ability to do that. So, responding as a active bystander, there's many ways to do it, right? You can be direct. You just walk up and be like, hey, I didn't like how you talked to that person, cut it out. That's pretty direct. Or I heard you, I don't want to hear it again. If I hear it again, I'm going to go to Melinda and she's going to take care of it. Or it could be indirect, where you kind of just passively work around. Maybe you go to somebody else or talk to somebody else about it. Or maybe you just talk about it with them without really talking about the situation. Distraction, I think distraction is one that I like, because sometimes you can use humor to kind of diffuse a situation, right? If that's your personality. You know, oh man, you remind me of a conversation that happened in Step Brothers, which, you know, a comedy movie or something. And, you know, just to get people talking, because it lowers the defenses and it allows them to kind of listen a little bit at that point. You could involve a friend or an ally. All right, I've got to address George for the 5th time because George is always pissy about something. Who else can come in and talk with him, with me, that makes that feel safe? Maybe he's got a real good connection to Jim, and Jim can come in and talk to it and go from there. And then there's always that next day or after the fact. All right, it's done. I feel like things are calm. I had 24 hours to sleep on it and process what the heck just happened. And now I can come back to him and say, hey, you know, yesterday when you're doing that, you made me feel really uncomfortable. I just wanted you to know that I'm here if you need to talk, if you've got a problem, you know, if you've got an issue with your spouse or something, you know, just let me know and help. But I don't want to hear you yelling at somebody. So there's many different ways that you can respond as an active bystander. So I'm going to kick it to Karen, and she's just going to quickly talk about some of the signs that you may see at the hospital if a victim presents that's a victim of domestic violence or human trafficking, and then, you know, your part as a bystander to make sure that they're getting to the right place.
So, some of these seem very, very obvious and very common sense, but, so if there's injuries that are hidden by clothing that are not obviously seen generally in the public, injuries to the face, chest, breast, and abdomen, the stomach, your tummy, as well. Common places, typical places where abuse occurs. Evidence of sexual abuse, injuries to the genitals, cruises where people can be held, things like that. Chronic pain problems, including pelvic pain, back pain, to trauma without physical evidence. And so we know that particularly with sexual abuse and domestic violence, where there's a lot of trauma, that there can be body memories or injuries where they're experiencing these because of the trauma and not because necessarily there's evidence or there's physical evidence, but that there's are existing because, again, of the trauma and the emotional effect. The explanation given is inconsistent with what you're seeing, what you're noticing. If there's multiple visits with the same types of injuries, and the story doesn't match the evidence, doesn't match the injuries. And then the patient, the service user, is accompanied by an overprotective partner who will not leave the room, will not let them answer questions even. I've seen that where it's like they ask a question, well, she fell down the steps, or she's just clumsy, things like that. Excuse me. And we know that occurs more often than not when someone's reporting for these injuries, especially if there's a lot of control going on. They're not allowed to leave by themselves. They're not allowed to seek this because, again, of the legal ramifications of what that all means. Excuse me. The other thing with this, and I'm just going to kind of put this out there, is if you're seeing someone and you're going to ask the question about being safe at home or with injuries, don't ask it with their partner in the room. It's happened to me a couple times at this facility. I'm not going to name names, but where I've been sitting there and they're asking me that question, and my partner's sitting there. Okay, well, that's one way to not get the answer you want, so you don't have to do anything else or call anybody in. It also happened to my mom a few years ago, and she actually said to the person, do you think I'd answer you honestly when you are asking that question? So be mindful of that. How do you get them out of the room? Can take some creativity. You may not be able to ask that question and do those safety things, but I think as a medical professional, maybe you can say, no, we never do this with anybody else in the room, however you want to do that. But also then getting them information about help. If you've got brochures in your bathrooms, in the rooms. I saw when we were walking through a tear-off thing, making sure that we get those in places where they might be by themselves. Again, the restrooms, exam rooms, things like that, where they may have some time where they can tear those off and seek assistance. And then signs of human trafficking. If you encounter someone who's reluctant to speak, again, maybe someone's speaking for them, are they reluctant to talk about what's really going on? Extreme exhaustion, if they're being dominated or controlled by someone. If they're fearful, if they talk about working long work hours, which could go to the exhaustion as well. And if they say, well, this is the only time I have because I've been working 12-hour days, 7 days a week for the past 6 months, those kinds of things. If they don't have family and friends, if they don't have a support system. If, again, this kind of goes for teens, if they have gifts, talk about gifts from their older boyfriends, those kinds of things, if there are signs of abuse. And if some other things, if they talk about, well, I was this town last week and I was over here 2 weeks ago, those kinds of things, like a lot of traveling that doesn't necessarily make sense, then that could be a red flag. That could be something exhibited by someone who's being trafficked.
So there's our presentation. Right on time, right?
Yes, sir.
Any questions or thoughts or anything?
Are there any trigger words that you should not say to somebody if you are going to talk to them or intervene? Or like you are at Walmart and this person, and you don't know anyone?
Yeah, I think it's always important not to try to escalate the situation through aggressive language, especially if you don't know somebody, or an aggressive tone. Elevating above where somebody else is probably going to only escalate the situation more. Being directly blameful also when you don't know someone could probably be a little bit dangerous. Hey, you know, you really suck at parenting. It's probably going to cause more problems. I mean, many years ago, I was at the Iowa State Fair, and to see Vanilla Ice, it was free. It was packed, and this woman was sitting in front of me, and she was cussing her kid out. This kid was like 4, and she was F-bombing him and everything. I'm like, hey, just cut it out, all right? There's other kids around, just stop. And she turned around, and she just laid into me like nothing. It just escalated the situation, and then it made everybody uncomfortable, right? So even though I hadn't necessarily escalated it, because I'm always cool, calm, and collected, it does happen from time to time. But the more, you know, if you can usually de-escalate under where the situation is and be a notch lower, that'll help.
And I think sometimes too, coming from a place of empathy, you know, like, and I've actually done this at stores with kids waiting in line and they're getting antsy and they're asking, you know, and it's like, wow, and I really respect, you know, how hard this must be to, you know, be out here talking with your kids and everything else and you know, saying that, and like you seem to be handling it really well, like they aren't, you know, it's like, so can I help you with anything, those kinds of things, but like, you know, acknowledging that it's difficult, acknowledging that things are escalating and you know, like going from there and you know, we're all in this together kind of thing. And
At what point do, like, in situations like that, if you say something and it escalates the situation more, or they become aggressive with you, at what point do you just say, okay, I give up, or just walk away and
Yeah.
be done with it?
I would encourage no one to ever put their safety in risk in that situation, to walk away and if need be, call local law enforcement. Because there may be a lot more brewing behind the scenes than what's there. But I would very much encourage no one to ever put themselves in a safety issue to be a bystander unless, you know, you feel like it's so morally right that there's nothing else you can do. Yeah.
Have you seen signs of human trafficking here in Waverly?
we see it everywhere. I mean,
And
you know, I
just
mean,
a lot of people are in denial of that,
oh, very
so-
much so, very
I
much
just-
so, and understandably, because it is kind of underground for as much as it isn't underground. I mean, it, looking at social media, and how it's advertised and things like that, it's not subtle at all. And it is very much in existence in our communities. We've served folks in our rural counties up in northeast Iowa, Dubuque, Cedar Rapids, Waverly, Waterloo. It's very much prevalent in our communities.
Is the resource line the same as like calling the shelter for your human trafficking